Most website builders are static, which don't allow you to do things like filtering or searching content, but not Webstudio. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can provide dynamic experiences to your users and let them do things like search content or be able to add filters to your content. We're going to be using Airtable as the backend in this example, but really you can swap out Airtable with Supabase or whatever other backend you want. The only difference is really going to be changing out how you connect to the API and how you kind of filter through the results. So in this video, first, I'm going to explain high level what we're going to be building and how it works, and I'll show you a demo to begin with. And then we are going to create a form. After that, we're going to create a collection. So after we get the data, it's going to display in the collection. And lastly, we are going to fetch the data, and that's where it should all come together. Okay, so high level. Nothing pretty right here, but I have a list of data that's coming from my Airtable. So here are my various records. I'm pulling them in and I'm going to be able to search them. So if I just want to search, for example, mouse, it's going to go to the back end. It's going to retrieve data matching mouse and it's going to display it here. What's really cool is that all of the items don't need to be here. I know on other platforms, there's a limitation where you have to put everything out there and it's going to filter it. But on Webstudio, it's actually running a query against your database and able to dynamically filter the content. So that's essentially what we're building. And how it works is when you search, it puts whatever your search is in the URL. So you can see name equals mouse. So we don't even really need the search technically. We could just go in here and, go name equals speaker, and then it's going to search for speaker. But obviously, users aren't going to want to do that. So that's why we're providing the search. But essentially, you fill out the form. It just puts the different field values in the URL, and then it reloads the page. And then when it reloads the page, it uses those field values in your query. That's high level what we are doing. So we can check that one off. Next, we need to create a form. All right, let's dive into Webstudio. I will create a new page here and we'll just call it demo. I typically like to start by just adding a page wrapper. This is just so I can easily take this and copy it to another page because you can't copy body. But now that we have page wrapper, I'm going to add the form in here. So we're going to go to form. Note that we're going to be using the form in the form section, not webhook form. That's if you want to send data to like an external service. But the form right here is just going to act as a regular form. In here, we need to add I'm going to add a label. This is going to be for the email, or not for the email, for the name. And then the text input, this is going to be the name. So you can call these whatever you want. And then we're going to be using these later. So for the input, I'm just going to call this name. I'm calling it that because my name column right here is called name, just so for consistency, but I can call it whatever I want. And then the input label, it's just good practice to say, what's this label for? It's for the name field. And let's just put name here. And then I'm going to add a submit button. Okay, so that's going to be in my forms. And now we've got submit, and we'll just say this is search. All right. Now we've got our name field, and we should be good to go there. I may need to revisit just in case I made any mistakes right here. But for the purpose of right now, we created the form. Next up, we need to create, once we do get the data, where's it going to go? It's going to go into a collection. So we're going to add that right here. And all a collection is it basically allows you to iterate over results. So if we have, 5 search results, it'll put 5 search results down here. And I am going to, in each one, add, what did we have? A heading. This is for the name. We'll do price and rating just to show you that we could bring in different fields. We'll just put this as an H3, assuming we have an H2 and an H1 above it. And then this is going to be the price. And now we've got rating. And we do have the full disposal of the style panel at our fingertips, so we can design this out nicely. I'm not really doing that right now at all. I'm not applying barely any styles. So we'll just call that title, whatever. And then I do want to wrap the collection in a box just so I can provide some spacing in between each one. The collection itself you don't apply styles to it. It just handles the data. So I'm just going to go up to the top here, make it flex, column, just add some arbitrary gap to separate them. And then I'll do the same thing with page wrapper, just very rough styles right here to make this demo a little bit more readable. Okay. And I guess we can just do something real quick here too while we're at it. Add a box. We will keep the input label and the input in this box, and then and the form, display this as flex. We have it in a row, add a little gap, put everything at the bottom, bottom left, and we are pretty good to go. Okay, so now we've got the form, we've got the collection, that's where the results will go. We'll be able to check that off. Now, this is where it's going to get tricky. So again, don't be discouraged. And I had to iterate over this several times, and you can get complex with this, or you can stay relatively simple. It just depends like how far you want to go with it. These are next to each other because they are text items. They're not paragraphs. So I'm just going to display flex on here. And you'll notice when we do it to one of them, it does it to all because this is essentially the same thing 3 times over. And we could even just add like a little gap there. All right, now we are going to fetch the data. So what we are going to do is add a variable. You can add variables on any item. I'm going to do page wrapper again, just because I can copy and paste the entire wrapper to another page if that need comes up. So we're going to head over to the settings tab and create a new variable. You could try to pack everything in one. I like to separate things though, and you'll see what I mean when I do this. So the first thing I'm going to do is say this is my Airtable URL, and I need to get that. So in Airtable, this takes me so long to find this resource. I think they moved it recently, but if you go to help and then API documentation, I always get confused because I think it's in the developer hub. It's not. It's in here, API documentation. And what's really cool about this is on the side, sometimes they blend in, but products table is automatically generated based on my table right here. So they're going to give me actual code that I can use that's like specific to my table. And I'll show you something really cool that the Webstudio engineers have done here is I can copy this curl command, which a lot of API documentation will provide. And I'm going to go over to over here. I'm doing this a little bit out of order, I think, but I'm going to add a resource, and we'll call this Airtable data. And a resource allows you to get or post information to a URL. And I'm going to paste in that entire curl command here. And you'll see what it does is it actually parses the URL. It knows it's a get, and then the headers are authorization, bearer, and then your secret in here. So it's really cool how it's able to just dynamically or automatically convert an entire curl command into the respective fields. Okay, this is Airtable data. I am going to save that. And nothing is going to happen right now. I mean, we can see if I go to the inspect, it's going to say authentication required. There's an error. And so if we notice in here, the value of the authorization says bear and then your secret. So I'm going to get my secret from, I have this on the home page here, the one I already set up. And I'm going to rotate the secret when I'm done. So yeah, that's not available out there on the internet, but just for demo here. It's a little bit weird if you've never done this before that the word bearer stays in there. Your authentication may be different if you're not using Airtable, but if you are, then keep it in there and then put a space and then your secret in there. Okay, now I'm going to refresh and then I'm going to inspect this, and this is going to tell me what data did I get back. If we're living right, we're going to see a lot of stuff here, and we can see that there's records. Each record has an ID, a price, rating, name, all that. And then at the bottom, we're going to see status 200, status okay. If you're not getting the records, you're going to still see status and status text, but this is going to be, 403, 500, some sort of error with an error message, and try to figure out what's going on. Was it a syntax error? Are you missing authorization? Is your URL properly formatted? ChatGPT can likely help with that. I have my data, but now the question is, how do we connect the search with our query? Right now, this query is always fetching all records. Actually, it's not, because Airtable gives you this max records 3, and view grid view. We actually don't want that right now. So I'm going to remove that. And that's why, I think in the back of my head, I was like, why aren't there more records? Now we should see all 5 records instead of 3. So to my previous statement, we're just fetching all the records. We're not providing any sort of dynamic query right now. Let's change that. And I didn't end up using Airtable URL. I might use that later. I guess I just like to plug in the Airtable URL right here as a variable, but whatever. So now we need to somehow get the query parameters, which are what the result of searching does, and get those into the query. So instead of just fetching a static URL, we need to fetch a dynamic URL. It's going to swap out information based on the situation we have at hand. We have the expression editor. If you click this plus button, and I'm going to expand the editor so it's just easier to see here. So if you look at the Airtable docs, and this isn't going to be a tutorial on Airtable or JavaScript, which we're going to use just a little bit in here. But if you do look at the Airtable docs, they'll show you there's a certain formula you can use to search. In this case, we want to search the name field, which is basically going to be saying name contains, I don't want to do a full equal. I want to be able to type in like MOU and then be able to get mouse. We need to make sure to get rid of this because we need to have access to all the data. But we need to translate that logic I just did in the UI right there into code, into an API call. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to cheat and go to what I already have done, but I'll explain it after I get some of this information. All right, don't be scared. There's a lot of stuff going on here. All right, so let's turn this into a dynamic query. What we need to do, okay, I just slimmed up the stuff that we're going to be doing just to focus on the kind of skeleton right here. So in Airtable, they have this thing that says filter by formula, and you say that's equal to the search, and then you get to put in whatever we want right here, and then what column are we searching? The name. Ask ChatGPT to help you out with this and look at the Airtable docs. This is outside of like the scope of Webstudio. I'm just kind of given their formulas or taking their formulas and putting them in a URL. So we have our default URL, but we're applying a filter and saying search for the value in the search field, which we don't have that yet, and search in the name column. So we need to get the value of the search field in here. So whatever you search, it shows up in this query. Now there is a special variable called, it's under system. And so you go to system and it's under parameters. Oops. And then it's not here yet because I haven't submitted the form. So maybe I should do that, but I know I named it name. So this is that field name that we named up here when we had the name on it. And that's what I called it. So that is automatically going to take whenever name is present in the URL and paste it in here. But we have a problem. We have this URL, and we're saying, okay, use this URL, use this URL, use this URL. And then this is all static. And now we say, okay, actually now change this to dynamic because we don't know what it is yet. It's going to swap out based on whatever the situation is, and then go back to static. So we can't have static and dynamic all in one line without doing anything special right here. We need to tell it what's static and what's dynamic. All right, we are going to do that by surrounding the entire statement with backticks. One in the beginning, one at the end, almost like quotes, but we're going to be using backticks. And what these do is it by default says, okay, anything in here is static until I get to a $, and then a curly bracket. And then I'm going to close the curly bracket over here. Okay, now, and you can even see that the color changed a little bit. Once we do this, it's static until we hit the $, and then the squiggly bracket. And then we can insert our variable here. Then we end it with the bracket, and everything else is static again. Okay, this is called template literal. So if you want to do any research, it's just a JavaScript thing. This isn't like specific to Webstudio. So it's just called template literals, and it allows you to mix static content with dynamic content. I think this should work. So I'm going to close it. And then once we close this, we're actually going to see it'll translate it all into like plain text. So it's search, and it says undefined right now because we haven't submitted anything. So I'm going to preview. You can't submit forms in non-preview because when you click on the button, it allows you to style it. You don't want to be submitting your form when you're styling. And I'm going to search for mouse. Nothing's going to happen, but something did happen, hopefully. So we're going to go back to the variable and JSON here, inspect. And we've got an error. So let's try to figure out what this error is. I'm going to do that by, well, first of all, reading the error message. Unknown field names, undefined. So something is going on with the field name. And then I'm looking here. And for whatever reason, our system parameter, it still says undefined right here. I would expect this to say, I think I searched for mouse. So let's go to our expression editor here. And let me see what I've done wrong. System param name. I'm going to get rid of name. And I'm not sure what's going on. So let's go up to the system variable here. It's on the body, inspect it. It does say, oh, I totally messed up. So I told you to use search, or I told you to use param, and it's search. Parameters is not for this. We'll get into that in another video. This is the search. These are search queries or query parameters. I get them mixed up in my head, and we need to change that out. My bad. So let's go over here. And instead of system.params, we're going to do system.search. I'm going to get rid of name, and I'll show you now that we've submitted it, it's already here. And so we can just select that. Okay, now we're going to close out of this. And I think we need to hit refresh. I don't know if it does it automatically. And I'm going to inspect. Okay, unknown field names, mouse. Let's see what's going on if I open this up. Okay, I made another error. We need to put mouse in parentheses. This is just, or I mean, quotations. This is just something that you would know if you looked at the docs. It'll have the exact, like an example in there. And I just forgot to put the quotations around it. So let's see what happens now. If we're living right, we should see records. Boom, we have one record. Now we need to map this data to the collection. Okay, so we have the data, but it's not showing up here. Let's go to the collection. And then in the data section, we're going to bind this to our Airtable data. And then we're going to go in here and click dot. And this is going to tell us what is like the child of the Airtable. So this is the entire record, but we only want to get the list of records. So right now it only has, it's doing everything. If we do dot data, then it'll get to dot records. If we were to do dot status, it would show us 200. So I want to get just to the records. So I'm going to do this data dot records dot, and I see a 0, which means that's the first item. When you have a list of items, they start at 0. And so I know, okay, I don't want to select 0 because I want to have the entire list. I don't want to just get one of the items. And we've got that. Now we need to go to my item. We'll see only one box because it'll dynamically display however many items you have in the collection. And I'm just going to go to each one. And by default, when we did this on the collection, it's called collection item. You can name this if you want and say this is like product item or whatever your data is. And I'm going to go in here, select product item, and then drill down, select fields. And then we're going to select the name. Okay. And then we're going to do the same thing. And sometimes it's annoying to just like drill down twice. So I'm going to copy the first part. Paste that in, and then dot price. Oops. What did I do? A little messed up the keyboard there, but that should work. We have price, and then what else did we want to get? I think the rating. Okay, cool. So now we've got all of our data right there. So this is like the I want to call it basic, but like we're doing something dynamic and kind of advanced. So that is pretty sufficient for many use cases, but I want to talk about going into a more advanced use case. And we already fetched the data, so advanced use case, we will do that right now. All right, so I want this page to load all of the values by default, or maybe just load like the top 10 if you have, thousands of records. You don't want to load all 1,000, but in my case, I'm going to load them all. And then I want to be able to dynamically apply that search if the user searches for it. If you go to a dashboard, you're going to see results and then optionally filter by it. So let's create that experience for our user. So what we need to do is modify our expression. And our expression should, instead of by default adding this filter, should only apply it if the search parameter is present. If it's not present, don't add this. And what that means is it'll just display all of them like we did before we had any dynamic component to it. To do this, we need to use more JavaScript in order to say, if this exists, then run this query. If it doesn't exist, don't run a query. We are going to do that by, first of all, kind of separating this out. I'm going to put a space here and one at the end so we can see what we're looking for. This section right here needs to be dynamic, or conditional rather. If this exists, then display this part. If it doesn't, then don't. To do that, we are going to do that. We're going to get out of static mode and we're going to go into dynamic mode. And we do that with our template literals. So I'm going to do the squiggly here, and then the curly bracket, and then put one at the end. And in here, I need to have a condition. So I'm just going to kind of move that to the right a little bit. I need to put something here that tests to see if this exists. So I'm going to grab this, and actually I'll just type it out so you can see that the autocomplete works. Oops. Search system.search.name. And then what we're going to do is put a question mark. What we're using right here is called the ternary operator in JavaScript. So you can look this up and do any research if you want, but right here, this is what it's going to say. It's going to have some sort of condition. We put a question mark. If it's true, run whatever's here, and then we're going to put this colon, and then run whatever here is false. So our condition is just putting the search there. If it exists, that means true. If it doesn't exist, that means false. So if it's true, then we're going to put that string that we had before that was our dynamic part. And then if it's false, we're just going to put two empty quotations and nothing's going to get added. So let's do that here. If it's true, we need to, first of all, we are going to use template literals again, template literals within literals. You don't have to, I think there's a different way to do this, but because what we're essentially doing is, okay, we want this to be dynamic. I'm sorry, we want this to be static. And then we're going to go, and then once we find that $, turn into dynamic. And then at the end of this, we are going to go another backtick. And then we actually don't want any spaces here because they will actually print out beforehand. These won't, so we're good. Okay, I think that is good. It rarely worked. Well, this is red, so I have some sort of error here, so it's not good. We have the question. Oh, I totally forgot to put the false statement. So this is if it's true, and then if it's false, we're going to put that colon and then put the empty quotations, and then just nothing will print out. Something is wrong. Unterminated template literal. Okay, I think what I did was I put this closing item here, and really the expression goes all the way till here. So this is where this one started, and this is where it ends. Okay. It's blue, so at least the syntax is correct. We'll see if Airtable likes what I've got going on. Now, right now, we have mouse present, I should have mentioned this earlier on, but when we're in preview mode, it actually doesn't show as a query parameter. So it's just in there and we don't really know about it. So that's probably going to change in the future. I'm going to refresh and that should get rid of any query parameters. Now we can see we have everything by default, so that's a good sign. And now I'm going to search for mouse. And boom, we have mouse. Let's publish this and just show you the actual query parameters. While that's publishing, I want to make mention that you can add multiple filters here. Once you do, you need to go to the Airtable or the expression editor and then just continue adding expressions here. Sometimes these can be a little bit challenging to work with directly in the UI. So you can go into like a code editor and break it up. So if I were to have taken this into a code editor, I would have taken, like this part and done it separately and then added it to the main one, because when you're nested so many times in this like one line, it can be confusing to understand where did the template literal start, where does it end. The only downside about working in an offline or off Webstudio editor is that even though this prints out as system.search.name, if I copy this and paste it up here, we'll see that there's actually some internal IDs going on. So it doesn't translate well if you take it out of Webstudio and back in, but you could just backspace out of, this and then just reselect the variable from Webstudio if you find it easier. Because as you add more conditions, so if you want to say, and if, price query parameter exists, do more stuff, then it's just going to get more and more complicated. All right, so let's go to our site and I'm going to copy it from here. This will be the URL. And then we've got all items. If I search for mouse, we can just see mouse, and you can see up here that the query parameter exists. If I get rid of it, we are now back to no mouse parameter. So we're going to just search for everything in the database. So that is the advanced use case. So with Webstudio, I hope this has like opened up your mind, and there's so many possibilities I'm sure I'm not even looking at right now, but the ability to interact with other APIs and let your users be able to type in information, interact with your interface, and for the application to dynamically run queries and fetch or post data to different systems. I just want to reiterate, don't be discouraged. I know some of this seems challenging. You can see I've been working with this for a while and I made several errors on this. And I even made a demo page before this to practice and I still got some of it wrong. So that's just normal. That's a part of the game. Stick with it. Search for ternary operator, search for JavaScript expressions. That's what the expression editor supports, those two types of logic items. And have ChatGPT help, and feel free to ask questions in the Discord community. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the community.